She held her breath and listened. Why did the night feel heavier than usual? The Colt 1911 sat cold in Sarah Reed's hand, the steel worn smooth by her grandfather's time in Korea and her own years overseas. Outside the shattered window of her diner, flashlights cut through the smoke and debris. Shadows moved like predators circling a wounded animal. Her back pressed against what was left of the kitchen wall, the smell of burnt wood and charred vinyl still raw in the air. "Check the office," a voice commanded, low and rough. Sarah narrowed her eyes. She knew that voice. Sila's, the man who had walked into her diner with the arrogance of ownership, the man who had tried to put a price on her fear. Max pressed against her leg. The German shepherd's growl rumbled like distant thunder, his amber eyes locked on the intruders. Sarah steadied her hand on his head, whispering softly, "Not yet, boy, not just yet." 6 hours earlier, the morning had been almost beautiful. Sunlight streamed across the checkered floor of Reed's diner, painting golden rectangles that stretched toward the jukebox. Sarah moved behind the counter with the rhythm of habit, the kind of discipline that never left you after 3 tours in Iraq. Every motion was sharp, efficient. Coffee poured, plates stacked, eyes scanning, always scanning. Her dog tags rested against her chest beneath a plain t-shirt, the edges dulled with years of wear. She didn't take them off anymore. Not because she was clinging to the past, but because they reminded her of people she couldn't let go of, names etched into stone, memories that still woke her in the middle of the night. She stopped mid-step to adjust a photograph on the wall. Her grandfather Jim stood there in his marine dress blues, a proud smile under the brim of his cover. The date was 1968, the opening day of the diner. He had built it after coming home from Korea, calling it his sanctuary, a place where the world slows down, Sarah, where people feel safe. Her fingers brushed the frame as she whispered, "Just like you taught me, Grandpa, keep the coffee hot and the doors open." The jukebox hummed to life with Creedence Clearwater Revival. Fortunate Son, his favorite. His taste in music had carried over to her the same way his old Colt had. Both heirlooms, both burdens, both lifelines. Max lifted his head from behind the counter, ears pricked, body alert. Tires crunched on gravel outside. Sarah leaned toward the window and caught sight of a black Dodge Ram crawling past, too slow, too interested. 3 silhouettes behind tinted glass. It was the 3rd time that week. "Speaking of trouble," Frank Miller muttered as he settled onto his usual stool at the counter. At 68, Frank was as permanent a fixture in the diner as the neon sign outside. Once the county sheriff, now just a retired man with too many aches and too much wisdom. "Morning, Frank," Sarah said, pouring coffee without asking. "Morning, Marine." His voice carried warmth, but the eyes above his weathered hands were sharper than most men half his age. "Coffee smells like salvation. Rough night for these old bones." She gave him a half smile, rougher than usual. He nodded, "But I didn't come here just for caffeine. Thought you should know there's been talk." Sarah stilled, coffee pot hovering in midair. "What kind of talk?" "Northside gang been creeping out of the city. 3 businesses hit on Route 16 last week. Classic protection racket." Her jaw tightened. Route 16 wasn't just a road. It was the artery that fed life into her diner, the path her grandfather had chosen when he built it at the crossroads. And gangs didn't circle for no reason. "Sheriff Reynolds doing anything about it?" she asked, forcing calm into her voice. Frank hesitated, something unspoken in his tone. "Thomas has his hands full. Budget been slashed to the bone. Department stretched thin." Sarah studied him. "But you don't buy that's the whole story." Frank's weathered hands wrapped tighter around the mug. "Just keep your eyes open. This place is a target, isolated, valuable." Max's growl came first. His hackles rose, his body braced toward the window. Sarah followed his stare. The Dodge Ram was back, rolling past again, slower this time. She couldn't see their eyes behind the tint, but she could feel them. Frank's expression hardened. Like I said, open those eyes. He slid a business card across the counter. Old friend of mine, private security, ex-military, might be worth a call. Sarah didn't touch it. I can handle myself. Never doubted that, kid, Frank replied. But even Marines need backup. His glance flicked to the spot under the counter where he knew she kept her grandfather's pistol. Sometimes you don't get to pick your battles. The bell above the door chimed again. A young family entered, laughter and chatter spilling into the quiet tension. Sarah straightened, slipping back into the rhythm of the job, smiling, pouring, serving. But her eyes lingered on the empty highway outside, and Max didn't lie back down. The war she thought she had left behind might have just found her again. Later that afternoon, Sarah sat alone at a table, the Colt field stripped across a clean cloth. The weapon was older than she was, its blued steel smooth with time. Her grandfather had taught her how to care for it when she was 10. A weapon, he'd said, his big hands guiding hers, is responsibility made solid. You respect it, you maintain it, and you pray you never need it. She reassembled the pistol with quick, sure motions. The sound of each click was muscle memory. Her breathing slowed. For her, this was meditation. That's when she heard the patrol car outside. Sheriff Thomas Reynolds stepped into the diner with the slow confidence of a man who had spent 3 decades wearing a badge. Gray at the temples, lined face, tired eyes. "Afternoon, Sarah," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Always time for the sheriff," she said lightly, pouring him coffee. But the conversation soon bent toward shadows. Reynolds asked about her grandfather's pistol too casually. He spoke of rumors of a gang moving closer, but his tone was wrong, too careful, too measured. When he left, Sarah caught him outside on the phone, voice low, body tense. The way his shoulders hunched, the way his face hardened. She had seen that look before, in men about to cross lines they couldn't uncross. That evening, when the headlights returned, she already knew. Engines growled outside, loud enough to shake the windows. The Dodge Ram, a Camaro, a lifted F-150, doors slammed, boots hit gravel. 5 men entered her world without knocking. Max's growl came first, deep and certain. Sarah met them with a calm voice. "Kitchen's closed. Coffee's all I've got left." The leader sat down at the counter as if he owned it, close-cropped hair, dead eyes, Sela's. The others fanned out behind him, one by the door, one by the register, one heading toward the kitchen, predators marking territory. He smiled without warmth. "Nice little place you've got here. Valuable spot on this highway. Shame if anything happened to it." "Protection?" Sarah asked flatly. "Insurance," Silas corrected. 200 a week buys you peace." She kept her hands still on the counter. Her right foot pressed lightly against Max's flank, a silent command. "Wait. This place has stood 50 years without insurance beyond what I pay the state," she said evenly. "I'll pass." The smile left his face. "That's not how this works." Max rose, silent, teeth bared. His amber eyes locked on the man behind the counter. "That's Max," Sarah said softly. 3 tour in Iraq, military working dog. He doesn't like uninvited guests." For the first time, Silas's calculation wavered. Then his smile returned colder. "You've got bite, Marine, but so do we." A hand drifted toward a pistol. And in the space of one heartbeat, the world shifted. Sarah dropped low, hands snapping to the hidden holster. Max lunged. Chairs toppled. The Colt roared once, its barrel steady, her voice sharp. "Nobody moves." The diner went still. For 3 long breaths, the only sound was Max's growl, vibrating through the floor. Silas chuckled. Well, not just Grandpa's diner, not just Grandpa's gun. You've got the look, Marines, Recon, 3 tour." His eyes narrowed. "This isn't over." Sarah didn't blink. "For tonight it is. Tomorrow's another day." They backed out slowly, never turning their backs. Engines roared. Tires spit gravel. But when their taillights disappeared, Sarah's pulse still thundered. She holstered the Colt, stroked Max's head, whispered, "Good boy." And then she bent to pick up the paper one of them had dropped in the lot. A map, a circle drawn around her diner, delivery times scrawled in the margins. This wasn't just extortion. It was bigger. Her grandfather's sanctuary was sitting in the middle of a war she hadn't chosen. Her phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number. "Reed," she answered. "Sarah, it's Mike Davidson. Got your message. Sorry I missed you earlier. You said it was important." Her old platoon leader, now DEA. Sarah stared at the map, at the circle around her home. "Yeah, Mike," she said quietly. "I think I've got a situation here, one you're going to want to hear about." Why was the sheriff's patrol car rolling past in the dark, headlights off? Sarah stood in the dim light of her diner, Colt holstered at her hip, map spread out across the counter. Max pressed close at her leg, ears pricked, body taut. Through the window, she watched Sheriff Thomas Reynolds's cruiser creep along the highway, moving slow, running dark like a thief instead of a lawman. Her phone was still warm from the call with Mike, DEA, her old platoon leader, the only man outside this county she trusted with her gut. And right now her gut screamed something was wrong. She whispered to Max, "Sheriff Reynolds worried about us or watching us." The shepherd's growl rumbled like an answer. By dawn she was back on her feet, forcing the routine to hold her together. Coffee brewing, grill hot, doors open. This was what she was fighting for, wasn't it? A diner that had stood for half a century as a safe place for truckers, families, travelers. A place her grandfather had built to prove life after war could be more than survival. Frank Miller came in early, sliding onto his stool with a look that already told her he knew. "It happened," he said quietly, after the coffee hit his hands. Sarah kept her voice low, calm for the empty diner. "5 of them. Their leader called himself Silas, offered me insurance. I declined." Frank's jaw tightened. North Side, Silas Cole, ex-military, bad piece of work. Her eyes flicked to him. "You know him." "I keep my ear to the ground," Frank muttered. "Old habits. He's been trouble in the city for years. Protection rackets, distribution runs. Now he's pushing rural. Makes sense, less patrols, easy roads to the interstate." Sarah laid the folded map on the counter. Frank leaned over it, his weathered hands steady. His eyes hardened as he took in the circles, the scribbled times. "This isn't just a shakedown," he said grimly. "They're setting up a pipeline." Sarah nodded, "and the diner sits in the middle of it." Frank looked up at her. "What'd you do when they made their offer?" "I declined," she said simply. A flicker of satisfaction passed over her face. Frank chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Bet that went over well." Then his tone sobered. "They'll be back, Sarah, with more men, more firepower." "I'm counting on it." She poured him another cup. "Called in a Marine buddy last night. DEA now. He's looking into it." Frank raised his eyebrows. "You stir the federal hornet's nest, this county's going to feel it." He paused, then added quietly, "Did you tell Reynolds?" "No," Sarah's voice flattened. "Something doesn't feel right about him. He drove past here last night running dark, like he was checking on me." Frank's weathered face clouded. "Thomas was straight once, good deputy, but people change. Temptation finds a way in." Before Sarah could answer, the diner door chimed. An elderly woman shuffled in, Nancy Williams, widow of her grandfather's old Marine buddy. Her cane tapped lightly against the floor as she settled on a stool. "The usual?" Sarah asked warmly. "Please, dear," Mrs. Williams said, her sharp eyes scanning Sarah's face. "I heard there was trouble." News traveled fast in towns like this. Sarah forced a calm smile. "Don't you worry about rumors. Reed's diner isn't going anywhere." Nancy's hand, veined and frail, reached across the counter to cover Sarah's. "Your grandfather said the same thing, even during the worst of it. Jim built this place as a beacon, a safe harbor, but some men hate the light if they've grown used to shadows." The words landed heavier than Sarah wanted to admit. She thought of her grandfather's photograph on the wall, his smile on opening day. She thought of his colt now riding at her back. That afternoon, as the rush faded, the attack escalated. Subtle but deliberate. Slashed tires on a farmer's truck out front. A threatening call to one of her regulars. A dead coyote dumped by her dumpster. The message was clear. Silas wasn't just coming for her. He was coming for anyone who stood with her. She was in the storeroom when the motion sensor beeped. The back door, locked an hour ago. Her hand slid to the Colt, quiet, smooth. Max stayed low beside her, silent as shadow. "Hello, Sarah." Sheriff Reynolds's voice came from the doorway. She didn't lower the weapon, not yet. "The back door was locked, Sheriff," she said evenly, "and you didn't knock." Reynolds smiled thinly. "Didn't see signs of forced entry, thought I'd check, doing my job." Her eyes narrowed. "There were no signs when I checked, until now." He studied the Colt in her hands, planning to use that. "Only if necessary." He stepped closer, his tone shifting. "Heard about a disturbance here last night. Armed confrontation. Why didn't you report it?" Sarah holstered the weapon, face neutral. "No disturbance. Just customers who didn't understand closing time." "That's not what I heard." His voice hardened. "Word is you pulled a gun, threatened men with that dog of yours." "Rumors," she said calmly, "and you know how rumors spread." Reynolds's patience snapped. "Don't play games with me. You're interfering with county business." Her eyes locked on his. "Extortion is county business now." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand the economics. This county can't afford real policing. Arrangements have to be made." "Arrangements," Sarah repeated flatly. "You mean letting criminals run drugs through your jurisdiction?" "You sound just like your grandfather, self-righteous, unable to see the bigger picture." "The picture looks pretty clear from here." His hand rested on his holster just enough to remind her. "I could shut this place down. Health violations, code enforcement, or maybe that unlicensed firearm you're carrying." "It's licensed," she replied evenly. "Paperwork in order, just like every record in this diner. Grandpa taught me that too." They stared at each other, the weight of old history between them. Finally, Reynolds stepped back, his voice low. "Last chance, Sarah. Northside is using this highway whether you like it or not. The only question is whether your diner stays standing." His words lingered even after he was gone. That night Sarah went down to the basement. Few people knew it existed, a fallout shelter her grandfather had built, and a vault for records. She opened the filing cabinet, hands trembling slightly as she sifted through decades of papers. Receipts, tax documents, old clippings, and then the journal, leather-bound, pages filled with Jim Reed's tight handwriting. April 15, 1993. Something happening in the county, trucks moving at night, Reynolds asking questions, offered to help with licensing if I adjusted hours, keeping my eyes open. June 28, 1993. Confronted Reynolds, he denied it, called it a sanctioned operation, said it was for the greater good. Warned me about Caroline and the kids, not direct but clear. October 3, 1993. They call it Operation Harvest, trafficking from Mexico through this county. Reynolds is their man inside. Frank suspects something. I'm documenting everything. If anything happens to me, this goes to the state attorney. Sarah's breath hitched. Her grandfather had been fighting the same battle, and the last entry. December 18, 1993. They came to the diner tonight, made it clear, cooperate or burn with the building. I've sent the family away, copies locked in the bank vault. Reynolds says I'm making a mistake, says some battles aren't worth fighting. He doesn't understand. A Reed never backs down from a fight worth fighting. The journal ended there. Sarah sat in the cold basement, Max curled at her feet, staring at the final words. Her grandfather had lived another 20 years, but the war had never ended. She closed the journal, a weight pressing on her chest. When she climbed the stairs, her phone buzzed. A text from Mike. Found something. ETA tomorrow morning. Don't trust Reynolds. Too late for that warning, Sarah thought grimly. But not too late to prepare. The next confrontation came faster than she expected. Engines, headlights cutting across the windows. 3 vehicles, 8 men. Sela's, Duke, Ray, and reinforcements. Sarah's hand found the Colt. Her other hand pressed Max toward the rear door. The front door shattered open. Sela's walked in, his men spreading out, their numbers heavy with promise of violence. "Evening, Marine," Sela said, his voice almost pleasant. "Hope we're not interrupting." "We're closed," Sarah replied, hands visible, tone flat. "Sign on the door, the one you just broke." He gestured to one of his men who pulled out a crowbar. Funny thing about places like this. Lots of accidents waiting to happen. Gas leaks, fires. The man raised the crowbar, aiming for the jukebox. Sarah drew and fired in one motion. The bullet hit the crowbar, spinning it from his hands. "Next one won't be a warning," she said, barrel trained on Sela's. Max emerged from the kitchen, teeth bared, and from the back of the diner came the sound of a shotgun racking. Frank Miller stepped into view. "Evening, boys," the former sheriff said calmly. "Might want to rethink your plans." For a heartbeat, silence. Then distant sirens wailed. Sarah's voice was steady. "State police, 8 minutes from the highway, you've got 3. Sela's smile thinned into something sharper. His men shifted, uncertain. "This isn't over," he growled. "It never is," Sarah replied. They retreated, headlights disappearing down the road. Only when they were gone did Sarah lower the Colt, her hand still steady, though her chest ached with the pounding of her heart. "Nice timing," she told Frank. "Would have been sooner if these old bones moved faster," he muttered. But his eyes glimmered with something else, loyalty. The moment shattered when footsteps approached. Sheriff Reynolds appeared in the doorway, face storm-dark. "What the hell going on here?" Sarah holstered the Colt slowly, her voice quiet but sharp. "Funny you should ask, Sheriff. I was about to ask you the same thing." Why did the flames look almost beautiful, even as they destroyed everything she had? Sarah stood in the gravel lot, breath ragged, Colt heavy at her hip, watching her grandfather's diner burn. The fire ate through the roof with a roar that shook the night sky, sparks rising into the black like lost souls. The air smelled of gasoline. Max pressed against her leg, growling at the shadows beyond the firelight. Frank stood beside her, shotgun in his weathered hands, his face etched with grief. "This wasn't random," he said hoarsely. "They torched it, retaliation." Sarah's throat closed, the jukebox, the photographs, her grandfather's journal still open on the counter, all of it devoured. She whispered through clenched teeth, "They want to erase it, erase him." Flashing lights cut through the smoke, sirens wailing as the volunteer fire crew arrived. Too late. The building groaned under its own weight, flames reaching higher. Sheriff Reynolds appeared in the glow, his cruiser pulling up slow, his expression unreadable. He stepped out, voice thick with forced authority. "Terrible tragedy," he said. "Damn shame about this place." Sarah turned on him, her face lit orange by the flames. "You knew." He didn't flinch. "Accidents happen." Her voice shook with rage. "They poured fuel, Thomas, I can smell it." But Reynolds just glanced toward the burning diner and muttered, "You should have taken the deal, Sarah. Would have saved you a lot of pain." Frank's shotgun rose half an inch. "Careful, Thomas. You're standing in front of a Marine and an old lawman with nothing left to lose." Reynolds studied them both, then stepped back. His voice dropped. "You've stirred up something bigger than you understand, and it won't stop here." He turned and drove off, leaving the flames to finish their work. Sarah's fists shook. She wanted to scream, to strike, to break something, but she stood still, shoulders rigid, eyes burning hotter than the fire. Her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. A Reed never backs down from a fight worth fighting. By dawn, the diner was gone. Nothing left but blackened beams and ash. Sarah sifted through the ruins with gloved hands, Max beside her, Frank standing watch. She found fragments of the jukebox, twisted metal of the stools, shards of ceramic from the old coffee mugs. She knelt where the photograph wall had been, lifting a scorched frame. The glass was cracked, the image burned away, but her grandfather's smile was still faintly visible. She pressed the frame to her chest. "They want to break you," Frank said quietly, "but you're not broken." Her phone buzzed. A text, "Mike Davidson, landed at motel outside town, meet ASAP." She looked up, ash clinging to her hands. "Time to stop waiting for them to come to me." That afternoon, Sarah walked into the dim motel room where Mike Davidson waited. He rose when he saw her, taller than she remembered, hair now peppered with gray, but the same sharp eyes she had trusted overseas. "Sarah," he said softly, "hell of a welcome home." She forced a grim smile. "Guess I don't do quiet retirements." Mike gestured to the table where files were spread across its surface. Photos, maps, documents. "You were right to call me," he said. "Silas Cole isn't just a gang leader. He's a cog in something bigger. DEA been tracking his crew for months, meth distribution running up the interstate. They've got supply chains tied to cartels. He's expanding rural because the city's heat is too heavy." Sarah stared at the photos. Silas outside a warehouse. Silas shaking hands with unfamiliar men in suits. Silas beside vehicles packed with crates. "And Reynolds?" she asked. Mike's jaw tightened. He slid another file toward her. "Our intel suggests your sheriff's on the take. Payments routed through shell companies. Reynolds keeps law enforcement looking the other way while Cole moves product. It's been going on for years." Sarah exhaled slowly. "My grandfather tried to expose it. He left records." Mike frowned. "Where?" She swallowed hard. "In the diner's basement, his journal, it's gone now, burned." Mike leaned forward. "Not all of it. Your grandfather was careful. We already pulled copies of his reports from an old bank vault he used. He documented everything. It's enough to bury Reynolds and maybe Cole too." Her chest tightened, relief mixed with grief. But Mike's eyes stayed hard. "The problem is, Cole knows you're standing in the middle of it. That fire wasn't just to scare you. It was a message. He's going to keep pushing until you're gone." Sarah's fists curled. "Then we push back." Mike hesitated. "You're not in the Corps anymore, Sarah. No backup, no chain of command, just you, me, and Frank if he's still got fight left in him. This isn't war. This is survival." Her eyes locked on his. "Sometimes survival is war." That night, Sarah returned to the diner's ruins with Max at her side. She stood in the moonlight, staring at the black skeleton of the place she loved. The silence was heavy, broken only by the dog's steady breath. She crouched by the rubble, brushing ash aside until her fingers found metal. The jukebox coin slot, burned but intact. She held it tight as if clinging to memory itself. Then she noticed something else, a scorched piece of paper under a charred beam. She pulled it free, fragile, edges blackened. Her grandfather's handwriting, faint but legible. "If anything happens, trust Frank. He knows where to look." Sarah froze, heart pounding. "Frank?" The next morning, she confronted him in his workshop, the old barn smelling of oil and sawdust. He was cleaning his shotgun when she arrived, but the look in his eyes told her he already knew what she'd found. "Your grandfather left me something," Frank admitted. "Didn't tell me until near the end. Said if the past ever came crawling back, you'd need it." He pulled a rusted lockbox from beneath the workbench, hands trembling slightly. Inside, photographs, documents, and a cassette tape labeled Harvest, 1993. Sarah lifted it carefully. "Operation Harvest," she whispered. Frank nodded grimly. "Proof Reynolds has been dirty longer than you've been a Marine." Her chest ached as she held the tape. Her grandfather's voice, evidence from decades ago. Max growled suddenly, ears sharp toward the window. Sarah's instincts flared. She grabbed the Colt. Frank raised the shotgun. Tires crunched outside, doors slammed. Voices, laughter. Silas. Frank muttered, "Damn it, they followed you." Sarah's blood went cold. The barn doors rattled as heavy boots approached. "Evening, Reed," Silas's voice rang out. "Heard you've been digging in the ashes. Found anything useful?" Sarah pressed her back against the wall, Colt steady in her grip. Max's growl rumbled like thunder. Frank chambered a shell. "We're cornered." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then we make the corner ours." The barn doors burst inward. Why did the silence before violence always feel like the loudest sound in the world? Sarah steadied her Colt, her heartbeat slowing into the rhythm she'd learned years ago, the calm before the breach. Frank stood beside her, shotgun braced, his weathered face set with a grim resolve. Max crouched low, teeth bared, waiting for her command. The barn doors rattled, then they burst open. Silas Cole stepped inside with 3 men, flashlights slicing through the dust, weapons glinting in the beams. His smirk was easy, confident. "Told you this wasn't over, Marine, and you're predictable. Should have known you'd come running to Grandpa's old buddy." Sarah didn't answer. Words were wasted now. The first man raised his rifle. The Colt barked once. The rifle clattered to the floor, man screaming, clutching a shattered wrist. Max lunged forward in the same breath, slamming the second man into the dirt, his growl tearing through the barn like thunder. Frank's shotgun thundered next. The blast tore a beam beside Sila's, showering sparks and splinters. Chaos, dust, shouts, the acrid stench of gunpowder filling the air. Silas didn't flinch. He raised his pistol slow, deliberate. Sarah dove behind a stack of crates, firing twice in rapid succession. One shot grazed Silas's arm. He grunted, but his grin never faded. "You've got teeth, Reed," he called through the dust. "Just like your old man, but teeth break." Frank shouted back, "You don't know who you're messing with, boy." Another blast from his shotgun, another cry of pain. Then headlights swept across the barn from outside. More engines, reinforcements. Sarah's stomach dropped. "Go," she barked at Frank. "Take the lockbox, back exit." He hesitated. "And you?" "I'll cover." Max barked, ears sharp, sensing the tension. Sarah pressed her hand to his flank. "With him, guard." For a moment, Frank looked at her the way her platoon sergeant once had, when they both knew not everyone would make it home. Then he grabbed the lockbox and sprinted toward the rear door, Max at his heels. Sarah turned back toward the advancing shadows. Her Colt rose steady, her breath slowed. One by one she fired, every shot deliberate, a shoulder, a leg, a weapon shattered from a hand. She wasn't killing them, not yet, but she was sending a message. Still numbers pressed. For every man who fell back, another filled the gap. Silas moved like a ghost in the chaos, slipping between cover, his eyes never leaving her. "You can't win this alone," he shouted. Sarah reloaded, her hands moving without thought. "Good thing I'm not alone." As if on cue, the night outside erupted with sirens. Real ones this time, state police. Mike Davidson had called them in. Silas cursed, his men faltered. For one heartbeat, Sarah thought the tide was shifting. Then the back of the barn exploded inward, a Molotov hurled through the window. Fire bloomed across the hay, orange and hungry, smoke clawing upward. The barn was a trap now. Sarah fell back, coughing, heat pressing against her skin. The fire spread fast, greedy. She could barely see Silas through the flames, his silhouette framed in orange. He raised his pistol at her. The shot rang out, but not from his gun. Silas staggered, clutching his side. He spun, eyes wide, and saw Frank behind him, shotgun braced. "Old bones still work," Frank rasped. Silas's grin twisted, blood on his teeth. He fired back wildly, bullets shredding wood. Frank fell with a cry, the shotgun skidding across the dirt. "Frank!" Sarah screamed, charging forward. She fired twice, forcing Silas back into the smoke. But when she reached Frank, he was bleeding from the shoulder, face pale. "Go," he gasped. "Get out." She grabbed his arm, hauling him up. "Not leaving you." Max reappeared, teeth red, growling at the door. The lockbox still clenched in his jaws. Through the fire, Sarah saw Silas retreating with his remaining men. His voice carried back, low and venomous. "This isn't done, Reed. Not by a long shot." Then he vanished into the night. The fire roared higher. Beams groaned overhead. Sarah dragged Frank toward the rear exit, Max clearing the path. They stumbled into the cold night air just as the barn collapsed behind them, flames reaching for the stars. They fell into the dirt, gasping, coughing. The lockbox lay between them, blackened but intact. Frank's voice shook. "He won't stop, Sarah, you know that." Her hand clenched into a fist. "Then neither will I." Moments later, headlights swept across them again, but this time it wasn't Silas. It was Mike, skidding to a stop, jumping from his truck. He helped haul Frank into the back, pressing gauze to his wound. "You both are lucky to be alive," Mike said, grim. His eyes flicked to the fire behind them. "Cole wanted to erase you tonight. Instead, he just showed his hand." Sarah's gaze stayed locked on the flames. The barn was gone. The diner was gone. The sanctuary her grandfather had built was ash. But the lockbox still existed. And with it, proof. Later that night, they regrouped at Mike's motel room. Frank lay bandaged on the bed, pale but stable. Max paced the room, restless, unwilling to settle. Sarah sat at the table, staring at the cassette tape in her hands. Her grandfather's voice, a message across decades. She slid it into an old player Mike had dug up. The tape hissed, then crackled to life. "If you're hearing this," Jim Reed's voice came, weary but strong, "then the fight I started never ended. Sheriff Reynolds has chosen the wrong side. He's working with traffickers under the name Operation Harvest. They'll tell you it's for stability, for order, but it's poison. And men like Silas Cole will keep feeding on it until someone stops them. If it's Sarah listening now, granddaughter Maureen, I'm sorry. I wanted peace for you, but you come from fighters. Don't let them turn this county into a feeding ground." The tape ended in static. Sarah's chest ached. She stared at the player, tears threatening, but her voice stayed steady. He knew. All along he knew this would come back. Mike's hand rested on the table, "And now it's on us to finish it." She looked at him, then at Frank, then at Max. The family she had left. Her voice was quiet but hard as steel. "Then we finish it." The next morning, Sarah drove the back roads in Mike's truck, Max in the seat beside her, the Colt heavy at her hip. She stared out across the fields, the county that had raised her, the land her grandfather had sworn to protect. She thought of the diner, the laughter of families, the jukebox playing Fortunate Son, the smell of coffee in the morning. All of it gone. But she wasn't gone. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it acts. Why did it feel easier going into combat zones than driving down her own county road? Sarah gripped the steering wheel, eyes sharp on the empty asphalt ahead. Max sat upright in the passenger seat, ears pricked, body tense, as if he knew what was coming. In the back seat, Mike Davidson checked the magazine on his Glock for the third time. The sunrise was thin and pale over the fields, painting the horizon in muted orange. But for Sarah, it didn't feel like morning. It felt like deployment again, the hum in her chest, the steady rhythm of breathing, the edge between calm and violence. "You're quiet," Mike said finally, studying her in the rearview mirror. She didn't look at him. "Thinking about all the years I spent trying to be normal, working shifts, serving pie to truckers, pretending the war was behind me. Now it's at my front door." Mike leaned forward. "You didn't invite it here, Sarah, but you've got the training to finish it." She gave a humorless smile. "Funny. That's exactly what they told me before my third tour. Silence stretched, broken only by the hum of the engine. The plan was simple. Hit one of Silas's supply lines, disrupt the flow, force him to make mistakes, and in the process gather evidence solid enough to bury him and Reynolds together. Frank had marked the map before dawn, his hand trembling but his voice steady. Cole's boys use Miller's quarry as a transfer site. Out of the way, no cameras, no neighbors. Trucks roll in after midnight. They move crates to pickups. By dawn, it's gone. Sarah traced the circle with her finger. We cut them off here, tonight. Mike had nodded. DEA stretched too thin to drop a task force, but 2 Marines and a state cop with nothing left to lose might be enough. Now, as the day bled into night, they parked half a mile out from the quarry. Max whined low, sensing the tension. Sarah ran her hands over his coat, steadying him and herself. "Stay close," she whispered. "We're ghosts tonight." The quarry loomed ahead, dark and jagged, lit only by the beams of 2 trucks idling near the pit. Men moved crates under tarps, their voices carrying in the cool night air. Sarah crouched low, Colt drawn, eyes scanning. She counted 6 men, 1 lookout by the truck, 4 hauling crates, and Silas himself leaning against the hood of his Camaro, cigarette glowing in the dark. Her pulse slowed, training took over. She and Mike split, flanking the pit. Sarah's boots moved silent across gravel, every step placed with precision. She reached cover behind a stack of concrete blocks, close enough to hear Silas's laugh. "Next run's bigger," he was saying. "Cartels doubling shipment, sheriffs lining the route, smooth sailing." Sarah's stomach twisted. Cartel, confirmation. Her grandfather had suspected it. Now she was hearing it with her own ears. She steadied her Colt. 1 squeeze of the trigger and Silas would drop. The war might end in an instant. But her finger didn't move. Because war never ended with 1 shot. Mike's voice crackled in her earpiece, low and tense. "On your mark." Sarah exhaled. "We need the crates, proof, hold fire." They waited until the men finished unloading, until the tarps were pulled back and she could see inside. Stacks of bricks wrapped tight in plastic. Meth, enough to poison half the state. She whispered, "Now." Mike moved first, Glock snapping twice. The lookout dropped, weapon spinning away. Sarah rose from cover, Colt barking, a clean shot to the truck's tires. The vehicle sagged, hissing air. Panic erupted. Men shouted, diving for cover. Silas spun, eyes wide, pistol already rising. Sarah aimed and fired. The bullet ripped the cigarette from his mouth, sparks flaring. His grin twisted, equal parts rage and respect. "You again," he growled. "Me again," she said coldly. The pit exploded into chaos. Mike dropped 1 man with a knee shot, another with a clean strike to the jaw. Sarah moved like she had in Fallujah, every step calculated, every shot controlled. Max barreled into a 3rd man, dragging him down, teeth sinking into his arm until the weapon fell free. But Silas slipped through the smoke and dust, shouting to his crew, "Load what you can, move." Sarah's eyes locked on him, Colt steady, but he fired first. The bullet grazed her shoulder, hot pain searing across her skin. She staggered, hissed through her teeth, and fired back. He ducked, vanishing into the cab of his Camaro. The engine roared to life, tires screaming as he tore out of the quarry, leaving his men scattered. Sarah wanted to chase. Every part of her screamed to finish it, but Mike's voice cut through the haze. "Evidence, get the crates." She turned back, chest heaving, and saw the stacks still lying under the tarps, untouched. Together, they hauled 2 crates into the truck bed. Max paced beside them, snarling at the wounded men left behind. By the time state police sirens wailed down the road, called in by Mike's earlier alert, Sarah was behind the wheel, driving fast, the evidence secured. Hours later, back at the motel, the crates lay open on the table. DEA-marked bags sealed around the bricks of meth, photographs, documentation, everything they needed. Mike stared at the stacks, his voice low. This is it. Enough to bring in a task force. Enough to put Reynolds in a cell. But Sarah wasn't looking at the crates. She was staring at the blood seeping through her bandage, at her grandfather's photograph on her phone, at the memory of flames eating the diner. Then why does it feel like it's not enough? She whispered. Mike's eyes softened. Because it's never enough. You take one piece off the board, another fills the space. That's the game. Sarah shook her head. No, this isn't a game, this is my home, and I won't let them take it. Frank shifted on the bed, pale but awake. Then you better be ready, girl, because men like Cole don't forgive. And Reynolds, he's going to feel the walls closing in. That's when snakes strike hardest. The room fell silent. Sarah thought of Silas's grin as he sped away, the cartel's reach, Reynolds's corruption. This wasn't the end. This was just the opening shot. The next night, Sarah stood at the ruins of her diner again. Moonlight bathed the ash in silver. Max sat beside her, watching the horizon. She whispered into the wind as if her grandfather could still hear. I'll finish it, Grandpa, I swear, for you, for this place. And in the quiet, with nothing left standing but memory, Sarah Reed finally stopped running from the war. Because the war had never ended. And now it was hers. Why did betrayal always cut deeper than bullets? Sarah lay awake in the motel room, listening to the rhythm of Max's breathing at her feet and the steady tick of the wall clock. Outside, the highway hummed faintly with distant trucks, but inside her chest, the silence was heavy, pressing down on her ribs like armor she couldn't remove. Mike had stepped out to contact DEA headquarters, his voice sharp with urgency. Frank slept fitfully in the next room, painkillers dulling his wound. That left Sarah alone with her thoughts, and with the weight of her grandfather's journal, scorched but still breathing truth. She traced a finger over the tape player, the one holding her grandfather's final message. His voice had become her compass, a warning and a vow. Max stirred suddenly, ears sharp. A low growl vibrated in his chest. Sarah froze, her hand slid to the Colt on the nightstand. Easy, boy, she whispered. Easy. Then she heard it too, a scrape at the door, a click of metal. Before she could rise, the lock exploded inward. The door swung wide, figures storming through, black-clad, armed, moving with precision. Not gang thugs, not cartel soldiers, tactical, law enforcement. Sheriff Reynolds stepped in behind them, badge gleaming under the dim motel light. His smile was razor-thin. Sarah Reed, he drawled, under arrest, conspiracy to traffic narcotics, assault on law enforcement, interference with official investigations. Max lunged before Sarah could stop him, teeth sinking into the arm of one deputy. Chaos erupted, shouts, struggle. Sarah swung the Colt up, but a taser cracked. Pain tore through her body, muscles seizing. She hit the floor hard, Colt skidding away. Reynolds crouched over her, his face close, his voice a whisper only she could hear. Told you not to fight battles you can't win. The deputies cuffed her, hauling her to her knees. Max snarled, refusing to back down until a second taser dropped him whimpering to the carpet. Sarah screamed, thrashing against the cuffs. Don't you touch him. But they dragged her dog aside, pinned under boot and baton. Mike burst back into the room then, Glock raised, but froze as half a dozen rifles turned on him. Reynolds's grin widened. Drop it, Davidson. DEA or not, jurisdiction ends here. Mike's jaw clenched. For a moment, Sarah thought he'd take the shot anyway, but slowly, reluctantly, he lowered his weapon, hands rising. Smart, Reynolds muttered. Frank shouted from the next room, stumbling into the doorway, pale and furious. Thomas, you son of a... A deputy slammed him back with a rifle butt. He crumpled, groaning. Sarah's chest burned as they dragged her out into the night. The air was cold, stars sharp above. She caught one last glimpse of Max, struggling weakly, before the motel door shut behind him. They shoved her into the back of the cruiser, cuffs biting her wrists. Reynolds slid into the driver's seat, humming tunelessly as he started the engine. For miles, silence. Then he spoke, voice casual, almost conversational. "You think you're fighting corruption, Sarah. Noble cause, but you're nothing but a nuisance. Sila's runs product. Cartel gets paid. County gets a cut. Everyone wins except you." Sarah stared at him, hatred steady in her eyes. "You'll hang for this." He chuckled. "Maybe, but by then you'll be buried in an unmarked file, just another veteran who lost her way, another headline people forget." The cruiser wound down back roads, far from town, far from help. Finally, they pulled into an abandoned grain silo. Floodlights flicked on. Men stepped from the shadows. Sila's, his crew. Reynolds dragged her from the cruiser and shoved her toward them. Silas's grin split wide when he saw her. Well, well, the Marine finally in chains. Sarah stayed silent, shoulders square, eyes unbroken. Silas circled her slowly, studying her like prey. "You burned one of my trucks, shot 3 of my men, took my product, that hurts. But here's the thing, Reed. Pain can be paid back." He signaled to his men. They shoved her to her knees. One pressed a pistol to the back of her skull. Reynolds watched, arms folded. His voice was flat. "Make it clean, no body, no trail." Sarah's chest heaved, but her voice was calm, even as the gun dug into her hairline. "You can kill me, but you won't kill the truth. My grandfather left records, copies, enough to bury both of you." Silas's eyes flickered. Reynolds stiffened. "She's bluffing." Sarah held his gaze. "Try me." For a long moment, silence stretched. Then Silas chuckled, shaking his head. "Not bluffing. Damn, she's got some of the old man in her." Reynolds snapped, "Then finish it." But Silas didn't move. His grin sharpened. "Not yet. Killing her here wastes potential. The cartel likes leverage, and a Marine makes fine leverage." Reynolds's face twisted. "This wasn't the plan." "Plans change," Silas said coldly. "You want her dead, do it yourself." For the first time, cracks showed in their alliance. Reynolds hesitated. His hand drifted toward his holster, but Sarah saw it in his eyes, the doubt, the fear of blood on his hands. Before he could decide, chaos erupted. Headlights flared across the lot. Engines roared. State police cruisers stormed in, sirens wailing. "Mike!" Shouts erupted. Silas's men scattered. Gunfire cracked through the night. Floodlights shattered. Sarah twisted, slamming her shoulder into the man behind her, knocking his pistol aside. Pain tore her wrists as she fought the cuffs, adrenaline drowning out everything else. "Sarah," Mike's voice cut through the noise. He sprinted toward her, firing controlled bursts. One bullet shattered her chains. "Free." The Colt wasn't in her hand, but her fists were enough. She spun, driving an elbow into her captor's face, then kicked another back against the silo wall. Blood roared in her ears, every movement muscle memory, every strike years of training unleashed. Silas fired into the chaos, then slipped into the shadows, always slipping. Reynolds fled toward his cruiser, ducking low, but Mike tackled him hard, pinning him against the dirt. The firefight burned hot for minutes, then ebbed as state troopers overwhelmed the scattered crew. One by one, rifles hit the ground. Men cuffed, dragged, silenced. And then silence, only the crackle of a burning floodlight. Sarah stood in the dirt, chest heaving, wrists raw and bleeding. Mike came to her side, panting. "You all right?" She nodded, voice steady. "I've been worse." They turned. Reynolds lay face down in the dirt, hands cuffed, fury etched into every line of his face. Frank arrived moments later in the back of an ambulance, pale but alive, insisting on standing with them. Max limped from the shadows, fur singed but eyes bright, tail thumping weakly. Sarah dropped to her knees, arms around him, relief breaking through her chest. But the night wasn't victory. Because Silas was gone. Again. Sarah stared into the darkness beyond the silo, her jaw tight. This doesn't end until he's finished. Mike nodded grimly. Then we finish it. Why did vengeance taste so much like survival? Sarah crouched in the brush overlooking the abandoned sawmill, breath slow, Colt steady in her grip. The night was quiet, broken only by the low hum of insects and the occasional rustle of leaves. But the silence felt wrong, heavy, waiting. Max lay at her side, eyes locked on the corrugated metal building below. His body trembled with readiness, ears pricked, every muscle alive. Behind her, Mike whispered, 2 trucks, 6 guards outside, more inside, Silas is here. DEA traced comms, this is his hub. Sarah didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on the mill. She could almost feel Silas down there, waiting, breathing, smiling that damn grin of his. Frank had begged her to rest, to let DEA and the state police handle it. But Sarah had seen what happened when you left battles in the hands of men like Reynolds. Corruption filled the cracks. This time she wasn't waiting for backup. This time she was the blade. Her voice was low, steady. We go in quiet, fast, take what we need, end this. Mike hesitated, and if you come face to face with him. Sarah's jaw tightened. Then I'll find out what kind of Marine I still am. They moved, ghosts in the dark. The first guard slumped soundlessly as Sarah's elbow struck his temple, her arm wrapping him down into the dirt. Max pulled another off his feet, dragging him into shadow. Mike's silencer coughed twice, and the way into the mill was open. Inside, the air was thick with the stink of oil and chemicals. Stacks of crates lined the walls. Meth, weapons, money, evidence that could bury Silas and the cartel in one stroke. Sarah's boots moved silent across the concrete, her Colt raised, eyes scanning every corner. Each step echoed with memories of Fallujah, of Ramadi, of houses cleared and friends lost. Only this time the war wasn't overseas. It was home. They reached the central office. The door was cracked open, light spilling through, voices inside. Silas's voice, smooth, cold. Sheriff's gone, DEA crawling over this county. We shift routes tomorrow, burn the rest. Nothing ties back to me. Another voice, a cartel lieutenant, Spanish sharp, and the Marine. Silas chuckled. She's a ghost story now. Even if she's breathing, she won't be for long. Sarah's breath hitched. Rage flared, hot and violent. For a heartbeat, she saw herself kicking the door, Colt raised, ending him right there. Her finger twitched on the trigger. But then her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. A reed never backs down from a fight worth fighting. But a fight worth fighting isn't about hate. Her chest heaved. She forced herself to steady, not vengeance, justice. She signaled to Mike. They moved in sync, kicking the door. The room exploded into chaos. Silas spun, pistol rising, but Sarah's Colt was already steady, aimed dead center at his chest. Don't, she growled. The cartel man lunged for his weapon. Mike fired, dropping him clean. Papers scattered across the desk, maps and ledgers flying. Proof, all of it. Silas's grin never faded. He dropped the pistol slowly, hands rising. Marine, always so righteous. Sarah stepped forward, the barrel of her Colt inches from his chest. Her voice shook with fury. You burned my diner. You tried to kill my dog. You've poisoned this county for years. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper only she could hear. And you want to kill me for it, don't you? Her breath caught. Because he was right. Every part of her screamed to pull the trigger, to end him, to erase his grin from the world. Mike's voice broke the moment. Sarah, think. If you kill him now, he becomes a martyr to the cartel. If you drag him out in chains, he becomes their weakness. Her hand trembled, Colt heavy, breath ragged. Silas saw it. He chuckled softly. You don't have it in you. You think you're different, but you're not. You're just like me. War taught us both the same lesson. Dignity doesn't mean a damn thing without power. Her finger tightened. Then she lowered the gun. No, she said softly. War taught me dignity doesn't need power. It just needs resolve. Mike cuffed him fast, hauling him to his feet. Silas didn't fight. His grin stayed. "This isn't the end, Reed," he murmured as they dragged him out. "You kill a snake, another grows in its place, and I'm bigger than a snake. I'm the roots under this county." Sarah didn't answer. She pressed the Colt back into its holster, her jaw hard. Outside, state police swarmed in, Mike's backup finally arriving. DEA vans rolled through the gates. Floodlights turned the mill into daylight. Crates were loaded, men arrested, evidence bagged. Sarah stood on the edge of it all, Max at her side, watching Silas shoved into the back of a van. It should have felt like victory. But it didn't. Because deep down she knew he was right. Snakes had many heads, and cutting one off didn't kill the nest. Later, back at the motel, Sarah sat in the dark with Max curled against her legs. She stared at the Colt on the table, her reflection in the blued steel. Mike entered quietly, setting down a folder of evidence. He watched her for a long moment. "You did the right thing." "Did I?" she whispered. He nodded. "You didn't give him what he wanted you to break. You didn't." Sarah's eyes stung. She whispered almost to herself, "But I wanted to." Silence. Finally, Mike said softly, "That's the fight, Sarah, not pulling the trigger, living with the weight of not pulling it." She looked at him, her voice trembling. "Then why doesn't it feel like a win?" "Because wins don't feel like wins in wars like these." He hesitated, then added, "But you gave this county a chance. That's more than most." Sarah stared into the dark. Her grandfather's photograph lay on the nightstand, half-burned edges still clinging to the frame. She reached for it, held it tight, and whispered, "I hope you'd be proud, Grandpa." The dog tags against her chest were cold, heavy. And somewhere deep down, she knew the final battle wasn't over yet. Because men like Silas didn't stay buried forever. Why did the silence after victory feel so much like waiting for the next war? Sarah stood outside the county courthouse, dawn just beginning to break, pale light spilling across the marble steps. The DEA vans had already rolled out hours earlier, carrying crates of meth, stacks of evidence, and dozens of Silas's men in chains. Sheriff Reynolds sat in federal custody now, his face plastered across headlines. It should have been over. But it was. Because Silas Cole had slipped free. Somewhere between the sawmill raid and federal transfer, he had vanished, an inside hand, a bribe, a shadowed back road. All Sarah knew was that he wasn't in custody, and as long as he breathed, the fight wasn't finished. Max shifted beside her, restless, nose to the wind. Mike stood a few steps away, his voice low. "DA's already on alert, he won't get far." Sarah's eyes stayed locked on the horizon. "Men like Silas don't run, they circle back. He's coming for me." Mike studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we'll be ready." But Sarah shook her head. "Not we, me. This started at my grandfather's diner, it ends with me." Mike wanted to argue, but one look at her eyes, steady, unbroken, told him it was no use. That night she returned to the ruins of the diner. Moonlight bathed the charred foundation in silver. She crouched among the ashes, running her fingers over blackened wood, remembering laughter, music, the smell of coffee. She whispered into the wind, "All right, Silas, come find me." And he did. Engines growled in the distance. Tires crunched over gravel. Headlights cut across the ruins. A black Camaro rolled to a stop, dust curling behind it. The door opened. Silas stepped out, slower now, shoulders stiff, bandage across his side, but his grin was still there. "Well," he drawled, "looks like the ghost decided to wait in her graveyard." Sarah rose slowly, Colt at her side, Max growling at her heel. Her voice was steady. "This is where it ends." He chuckled, pulling a pistol from his waistband. "Funny, that's exactly what I was about to say." For a moment, silence, two predators in the ashes of memory. Then he fired first. Sarah dropped low, Colt snapping up, bullet grazing his arm. He staggered, cursed, fired again. Sparks showered from stone. Max lunged, forcing him back. The fight was brutal, close, raw. They slammed into broken beams, fists and gunmetal colliding, breaths ragged in the cold night air. Silas swung hard, catching Sarah's jaw. She reeled, blood in her mouth, vision sharp with fury. Her Colt slid across the ground. His pistol clattered into the rubble. Now it was hands, elbows, boots, the old way. The way war sometimes became when everything else failed. Silas pressed her down against the charred floor, his breath hot, teeth bared. "You can't win, Reed. You kill me, 10 more take my place. You let me live, I burn this county until there's nothing left." Her hands scrabbled against the ash, fingers closing around a shard of twisted metal. She drove it up hard, catching his shoulder. He roared, staggering back. Sarah rose, chest heaving, blood running down her lip. She retrieved her Colt, steady now, aimed dead at his chest. Silas froze, arms spread, grin twisted through blood. "There it is. The moment. Pull the trigger, Reed. Be the thing you swore you'd never be, or prove me right, prove you're too weak to finish what you started." The world slowed. She saw her grandfather's diner burning. She saw Reynolds in cuffs. She saw Frank bleeding on the barn floor. She saw Max scarred but alive. She saw the empty faces of those who had died in wars no one remembered. Her finger hovered on the trigger. But she didn't pull it. Because Silas was wrong. Strength wasn't pulling the trigger. Strength was living with the weight of not pulling it. Her voice was steady, quiet, deadly calm. "No, you don't get to decide who I am." Headlights washed over the ruins. Mike's truck roared in, state police behind him. Silas cursed, turning toward the light, and in that moment Max lunged, slamming him to the ground, holding him until cuffs snapped around his wrists. The fight was over. Sarah holstered her Colt, her hands steady at last. She stood among the ashes of her grandfather's dream, breathing hard, watching Silas dragged away. His grin was gone now. Mike stepped to her side, his voice low. "You could have ended him." She nodded slowly. "I did, just not the way he wanted." Later, as dawn rose over the county, Sarah sat on the diner's foundation with Max at her feet. The sun painted the ruins in gold, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to peace. Frank joined her, moving slow, his arm still bandaged. He lowered himself onto the beam beside her, wincing but smiling faintly. "Your grandfather would have been proud." Sarah didn't answer right away. She watched the sunlight stretch across the empty highway, the same road her grandfather had once called a lifeline. Finally, she whispered, "Maybe pride's not the point. Maybe it's just about not letting fear decide who we become." Frank nodded, "Maybe so." Max pressed against her leg, warm, steady. She rested her hand on his head, eyes soft. The war inside her hadn't ended, it never would, but she had chosen her ground, she had chosen her fight. And in the silence of the new day, she knew she had won. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.